Are you tired of your valuable ideas and suggestions getting lost in the shuffle? Well, that is why I'm introducing Direct Suggest, the revolutionary digital suggestion box that puts your voice front and center. With Direct Suggest, you have the power to make a difference in your organization. Direct Suggest provides value to organizations in various industries worldwide, including notable brands like Comcast, TD Bank, and Nokia. And here's the best part. Direct Suggest only costs 50 cents per employee per month, making it an affordable solution for businesses of all sizes. Plus, they have an incredibly high ROI and savings potential with an average 33 times return on investment. The implementation process is also a breeze. Once committed, setting up Direct Suggest from start to finish can be completed in as quickly as a week or less. Don't let your ideas or your team's ideas go unnoticed. Visit directsuggest.com today and start by making a difference with Direct Suggest. Use the promo code HUMANHR for your extended 60-day free trial. Again, visit directsuggest.com to learn more, and remember to use promo code HUMANHR for an extended free trial. Direct Suggest, where your voice matters. Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Tracy Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. Make sure you head to my website, hrtracy.com, subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, and connect with me on Instagram too at hrtracy. This week, I have Damien Filiatrault with me as my guest this week, and we're going to talk about something that is super, super relevant to all of our lives because at some level, we are all doing some kind of hiring, or we ourselves are candidates in the recruiting process. So this is going to be a super timely topic for all of us. So Damien is the founder and CEO of Scalable Path, a software staffing agency that matches leading companies and startups with vetted remote software developers. Previously, he headed PHP development at Solution Set, a multi-channel marketing services company where he spent 5 months managing a team of developers in Goa, India. Damien has held sales and marketing positions of notable San Francisco technology companies, including Evite and CNET Networks. Through his work at Scalable Path, Damien has championed employment equity for software developers across Latin America. He also cares deeply for the environment and has pledged 10% of all Scalable Path profits to climate change research, which I totally love. Damien also holds a BA in Geography and BSc in Computer Science from UC Berkeley and San Jose State University, and he's passionate about software development and agile processes. So welcome, Damien. What an amazing bio. I love it.
Thank you for going through that whole thing.
I know is it awkward when you hear someone reading your bio? Because I've been on enough podcasts. Yeah, right? You're like, what do I do? Do I twiddle my thumbs? Do I just say yes to everything? I know. But you know what? These are all of your accolades and all the things that you care so much about. So it's hopefully kind of nice to be able to hear it back because otherwise it's just something that you wrote once and probably don't look at that much.
True.
Yes. Anyway, I'm really excited for our conversation today because, on the podcast, I've had a number of guests who talk about recruiting processes and things like that, and whether, people should be fully involved, whether AI should be fully involved. And before we started recording, you and I kind of talked a little bit about both of those things. So why don't you kick us off? I know that you are obviously speaking from a ton of personal experience since this is literally your business, your bread and butter. But why do you feel that recruiting processes are broken? And what is it about Scalable Path that really seeks to solve some of those problems? And I know we're going to dive into the bigger picture there too.
Mm-hmm. Well, to start off on why I think the recruiting process is broken in a lot of places, I think you can look at platforms like Indeed as a case study where they have, I think, something called, one-click apply. And I think that recruiting doesn't work very well when the different players in the process don't have any skin in the game. Like if I'm an applicant and it takes me literally 1 second to apply to a job, I'll just apply to any job. right?
Hmm.
And then so I don't have any skin in the game as an applicant, um, and as a company or a recruiter sifting through all these applicants, I'm going to get thousands and thousands of applications from people that may or may not be qualified, and it leads to a big problem where how do you process these thousands of questionable applications? And we're all hearing about AI, in the news all day about Chat GPT, and it remains to be seen how we can apply that to recruiting. But for more than a year, people have been using other AIs to um, you know apparently improve the recruiting process. But um, I see this use of AI as almost like solving a problem that didn't need to exist in the first place. If you could structure your process in such a way that the people that were applying actually were qualified, or if you were reaching out to a more targeted set of individuals, then you would get a more reasonable set of applicants that you could, as a human, parse through. And so that's one way I think um, things are broken. And just I'll kick it back to you there. I mean, does this relate to anything that does this resonate with you and what you do?
Totally. I mean, it fully resonates. And actually, I have to be candid. Like, I personally, as a candidate, love the easy apply, but not for the jobs that I really want. Rather for the jobs, in terms of like volume. Like whenever I've been in the job market or searching, which I'm not currently, so maybe things have changed a little bit, but like having that easy apply on LinkedIn or Indeed it's made statistically the ability to get an interview maybe a little bit higher. Like obviously that is a benefit for the candidate, but being in HR and being on the opposite side of an easy apply button, you get hundreds and hundreds of resumes that are not necessarily relevant to the job at all. So there, to me, there's almost like that small percentage of people who do take advantage of easy apply that actually could be relevant or qualified for the job. But then for on the business side, it's totally unsustainable. So I fully agree with what you're saying, but I can also see how a candidate would be like, oh well, I don't really want to dedicate the time to put into all of these applications. But then that's kind of comes back to what you said before about needing to have this like mutual skin in the game. If a candidate is not taking the time, do they really want the job? So it's like, this all kind of comes full circle. So yes, it totally resonates, but then it leads me to wonder, is there a way to make it so that the candidate is having a seamless experience in the way that this easy apply is totally reminiscent of why TikTok and Instagram and video content is so popular, because our attention spans really prefer like 30-second to 1 minute videos, or, moments in time, I should say. So, is there a way to capitalize on that to maximize a candidate's, I don't know, nature, while also ensuring that the business is not sacrificing its time, productivity, and energy through, having to sift through thousands of applications that are coming through an easy apply button?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to do that. I think if you're a company, a temporary staffing company trying to hire a large volume of people for an event or something, yeah, I mean, there's not a you're not going to be working with these people for a long time. It's like, okay, we just need bodies in this
Yeah.
place. Then yeah, we don't need to spend a lot of time as a company or as an applicant, like saying why we're a great fit, or really putting effort into it. But I don't think I want to be in a recruiting world where candidates don't take the time to
Yeah.
think about each job they apply for, and think about why they are a good fit and communicate that to me. And I started off saying it about it's too easy for candidates. I think that the same thing goes for the companies posting. I think they've got to have skin in the game. I don't want a company going on 20 platforms and putting in some
Mm-hmm.
crappy job description,
Right.
and just seeing what happens. And then I'm taking my time as an applicant. Maybe I am taking time and I'm investing, and they're not even paying attention
Yeah,
because
that's
they only
so worse.
spent 1 minute posting this on every platform they could think of, and then no one's monitoring the applications.
Yeah.
So you have to have them have skin in the game too, where the company takes the time to really define their job description and write a thorough and compelling job description. And then, so if you have a platform where, okay, the jobs that are on there are good jobs and they're well described, and then the people who are in the platform are have really fleshed out profiles. And one other thing is that, like, in our profile, in our platform, people have to decide what they're good at. They have to choose, like, up to 3 areas of expertise. They can list a lot of different skills, but they kind of have to define themselves
Hmm.
as being, these are my top areas. And so you can't just say I'm great at everything, or you can't just
Right.
see a job that you want and then change your resume to match.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have to make a decision about who you are, so that clients can have more confidence, or for higher, companies can have more confidence that you really are who you are and that you have the skills. I mean, later on we put them through vetting, and that's a whole other thing. But I think to summarize, like, you have to have candidates putting in, thought and effort into applying, and you have to have clients putting thought and effort into posting jobs. And that's one way I think it's broken, the process. I mean, but taking this AI, um, movement to another level, like, there's a lot of tools coming out right now that are trying to make things really efficient for the recruiters or the hiring companies by actually having AI do the work that a traditional recruiter might do. They might say, here, okay, you applied. Now join this video interview. And the video interview is just an AI, just recording you
Mm.
as an
Yeah.
AI asks you questions. And then these products claim to be able to watch the video and read through the transcript of these answers
Hmm.
and then rank the candidates. Like, this is where
Yeah.
it's going. And from what I've seen and what I've read, it's not working very well. um, there's a lot of bias in the data that these models have been trained on. It's a I mean, and even beside the fact that the results aren't that great, um, it's just a crappy experience for a an applicant. Like, as an applicant, it just makes you feel very impersonal. Like, you're just sort of like livestock being kind of processed through this pipeline. And I think that companies that, just like the name of your podcast, keep the humans involved, are going to have better results, not only in fostering relationships with good potential candidates, but having better actual results, because human beings are way better than AI at reading a human and
Yeah.
knowing, okay, um, like, there's examples of, you know, people getting ranked high and not even speaking English in the, in the interview. They've tested it. I maybe we can share this in a link somewhere, but there was a podcast I listened to where they were testing these products, and the person just spoke German the whole time and got a great interview ranking. And the AI didn't even know they weren't speaking English. Like, they're just
Mm.
using some facial expressions or something. So there's some really bizarre results coming out of that. Um, so bad experience and bad results.
Mm-hmm.
So I really do believe you have to keep humans involved. Maybe someday in the future, the AI will get good enough, or people won't care about talking to AI, but I don't think that moment is now.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up the AI side of things because obviously it's pertinent considering it is like the number one thing in the news these days. I totally agree. And I've had some guests who advocate for AI only. I've had guests who advocate for a mix of both. I've had guests who advocate for just human recruiting styles. So I am of the belief that AI can supplement certain things and AI can support businesses and people to do things that are pretty administrative, that otherwise could be seen as like a waste of productivity for someone who
Mm-hmm.
could be spending their time doing something more beneficial for themselves and the company. In a recruiting process specifically, I think this is like best seen because AI is, to your point, not sentient, and it's not going to be able to pick up on the interpersonal things that come out of a recruiting process. And beyond that, even more importantly, the whole point of a recruiting process is to measure, not only for the candidate, but also for the business, how well someone is going to not just fit, but add value to an organization, the culture, what they're bringing to the table, how competent they are. And those are things that you really need to measure through conversation and that interpersonal communication again. So, for the candidate experience, like I couldn't imagine speaking to a computer and feeling like I'm walking away from that process like one, knowing more than I did going into the interview, and two, feeling like this was a culture that I wanted to contribute to. Because what culture or what feeling of culture are you getting from AI? You're really not. So I do think there is a huge importance in keeping humans involved in
Mm-hmm.
human related processes like recruiting, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned before we started speaking or recording, excuse me, that AI basically came out to solve a problem. AI specifically in recruiting came out to solve some of these recruiting challenges. But we need to understand these are primarily in your words. We need to understand what the real solution is because AI is not
Mm-hmm.
going to be that end all be all, at least not today, for these challenges. So, what can be the solution? Is it a fully human led process? Is it leveraging AI for those administrative things like scheduling and,
Mm-hmm.
follow up, or is it something else? If your company is remote or hybrid, then you know just how difficult it can be to grow your company's culture beyond a pre scheduled Zoom happy hour or occasional lunch and learn. Well, this week's sponsor is here to solve that. They're called CultureBot. CultureBot has devised what will likely become the gold standard for growing and blossoming a company culture inside of Slack. The app is like a sidekick for any HR or people professional, automating a lot of the mundane tasks you probably are forgetting to do on a daily basis. Things like birthday and work anniversary celebrations, team shoutouts and kudos, employee introductions, and remote games. It even has health and wellness tips and conversation starters. If that piques your interest, this will get you even more excited. Today, I'm able to share a special promotion for listeners of the podcast. You can get your first 6 months of CultureBot for 50% off. Plus, if your team is under 25 employees, CultureBot is free forever. So if you're looking for a way to create a culture of appreciation and drive increased engagement and togetherness across your team, I definitely recommend checking out CultureBot. Go to getculturebot.com/humanhr. That's getculturebot.com/humanhr to get the offer. Plus, I've added the link in the show notes so you can just click right there. Now, let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that AI, we're using it. We're using it internally. We use it for scheduling. We use it for and I'll some of the things that I would lump into this. It's not just AI. It's like AI and automation, software automation.
Right,
I mean,
right.
not everything is AI, and that's an impersonal software product. But like, Calendly, it's not technically AI. There are AI schedulers, but you can automate. And
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there are, I'm not a Luddite. Like if something works, let's use it. So we're using AI, like we're using ChatGPT to help us proofread or, write better job descriptions. You know, we're using it to, maybe even you could say like, oh, tell me a list of great questions to ask a candidate if
Sure.
this is my job description. And not just taking the output of AI and just regurgitating it, but oh, that's an interesting one. Let me tweak that. Let me add another question to the list. But using software and AI as a tool as a recruiter, um, that seems fine to me. It's when you're making the hiring decision with an AI, that I don't think we're ready for that, and we may never be. They
Mm-hmm.
can still
I
be
agree.
gamed. It's hard for AI to tell when someone is BSing you or
Mm-hmm.
BSing it, you know, and humans can pick up on that because
Right.
there's a lot of great smooth talkers out there in job interviews.
Yeah.
Um, so I do to answer your question. I would say, yeah, there is a, um, how we see it at Scalable Path is you give the recruiter, or we call it, the talent specialist, a lot of tools. You give them a platform, an applicant tracking system. You give them all the tools in the world, but you you keep them involved for those key decisions
Mm-hmm.
and key touch points. I mean, in my space, which is like the premium software developer, you know, talent space, there's a lot of players out there, and I think one thing that sets us apart is we're a company that is not trying to grow like, um we're not taking VC funding and trying to experience like hyper growth and like be a
Mm-hmm.
unicorn and just, you know, make, prioritize profit above everything else. I think that there are companies in the space, in the recruiting space, that have gone out to get investment with the story of, we're going to use AI to automate practically everything, and that's how we're going to make tons of money, and that's why you're going to give us hundreds of millions of dollars. And what that ends up doing is, we started earlier talking about how people need to have skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the company, like call it the recruiter or the platform, or the company that's doing the hiring and vetting, sourcing and vetting and placing, they need to have skin in the game too, right? So if they're just like, oh well, we just wrote this software, and we're just matching clients with, matching companies with developers, and we don't really care if, you know I don't know, 60% of them don't even work,
Mm.
because we're just going to do a numbers game. We're going to let the clients do the work, posting jobs. We're going to let the candidates do the work, applying, and we're just going to let this AI sort it out. And even if it doesn't work a lot of the time, we don't care. We're not spending any time ourselves. So we have skin in the game. We care. We have humans spending hours reviewing candidates, taking them to the next level, doing real live coding exercises with
Mm.
them that,
Wow.
that take time. And so we're invested, and we want to find a great fit. When you go with these platforms that are relying too much on automation and AI, they don't have any skin in the game,
Mm.
and the likelihood of success because of that, I think, is less.
I'm glad you brought up this point on, pretty much like some of the nuances to hiring someone who is in a specific type of career with a specific education. And, like for example, with software developers, a lot have PhDs, or they're going, they have their masters, they're going for PhDs, and they have all of this accreditation. And obviously, it's
but
a
but
different
a lot of them
skill
don't
set.
even have a lot of them don't even have just self-taught, and they're great too. I
Really?
will say that. Oh
Oh,
yeah.
that's pretty cool then. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that. I kind of thought that this was like something that everyone had to have this like background
No,
and education
I
in.
mean, it's definitely a feather in your cap if you've got a degree, but like there's a lot of
Oh,
great
wow.
software developers out there who just, because there's so many online resources,
Yeah, that's
and
true. And
you
there are
can
like
just
free
learn on the
courses you can
job.
take.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. I guess then let me amend my statement here. With software developers, then at least whether they have the educational background or not, they have this tactical skill. It's like a skill based role, which obviously HR requires skills, finance has skills, like all of these jobs have skills. So I'm not saying that
Hmm.
everything else is skill less. That is certainly not what I'm saying. But rather, I think what I'm trying to
Hmm.
get at here is that in certain industries and certain professions, there is a very specific set of qualifications and skill sets
Hmm.
that are required in order to be perceived as not only competent, but qualified for the role. Whereas someone, let's take HR, for example, might just need work experience rather than, an educational
Hmm.
background or accreditation or anything like that. So, my question here for you is whether or not this kind of like approach where AI is involved, or even like the ease in applying, like how easy it is for people to apply to jobs these days because of that one click or easy apply button. Are those solutions, proverbial solutions at this point, because we've agreed that they're not necessarily this end all be all, are they better suited for certain industries like retail where job experience or managerial experience or cashier experience is king, but education is not necessarily king, like, and you need a higher volume of candidates? Do you see what I'm getting at here? Like,
Yeah.
is
No,
there an
I would
industry where
agree.
it's more relevant?
I would agree. I think I touched on this earlier that the the more high volume or less, I don't know, previous experience or skill is needed in a position, I think that the less
Hmm.
heavy the recruiting process probably needs to be, or less
Right.
detail oriented. I think the more you get into higher specific skills that can be tested, or senior roles, people that are going to be extremely mission critical to your organization over a longer term, I think you want to invest more at every level of the process.
Mm-hmm.
um, One other thing that came to mind when you were talking about you know just a moment ago was you know the vetting process that people go through. um, as a software developer, I thought this is where you were going when talking about software developers. Like, it's really interesting what AI has done to this. Like, there's whole companies like HackerRank and other companies that like provide um, you know testing services for developers, right? And a lot of them would do this in a fully automated way. They'd say like, okay, come in. Companies do this themselves, right? They'll say, okay, do this test online, and then we're going to know if you're good at JavaScript, or we're going to know if
Right.
you're good at this. But what's really crazy is that you can take those questions and put them into Chat GPT, and it will solve them like right away,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
Right.
And like, we've done it with our questions, and we're like, oh my, this is really a thing. So everyone's getting a little
Yeah.
panicked, like
Right.
these online tests are just totally solvable via AI. And it's like coming full circle on why you need to the people involved, because you it's really interesting because using AI is now like a skill for developers. It's one of the industries that's going to be most
Hmm.
impacted potentially in a positive way. It is software programming, because you can use this AI almost
Hmm.
as like, there's this concept in programming called pair programming, where you would pair up with another human, and you would like work on a problem together, and you'd be like, oh, I would do this, and you write some code, and then the other person goes, oh, like, what if you did this better or whatever. And it's a people do it in real life, and it sounds like it could be more costly because you're paying two people to work on the same thing, but it can
Hmm.
have really strong results. But
Right.
now AI is becoming like that pair person. You can say, you can just be starting a task and you can go to ChatGPT and say, okay, well, this, I want to write some PHP code that accomplishes this, and it'll spit it out. And then you could be like, oh, that's a good idea. And you can copy and paste and then edit it a little bit. And then you could even say, well, could you improve the efficiency of this? And it'll do it. And so learning how to prompt an AI and code with an AI is a really good skill. And so
Mm,
you actually, when you're evaluating candidates, you want them to be able to use the AI.
sure.
If you're saying
Yeah.
you're going to do our test, but you can't use AI, that's like saying like, I want you to, I don't know, because you want to have their evaluation be as close to what they would do on the real job
Sure.
as possible, right? And so you're like, okay, well, how would you do this? And if the most efficient way is to use AI, you want to let them, but you want to be watching how they use it. And that's why we do that with a human. And so
Right.
we can let them use the tool and we can see how they're using the tool. And if they're using it a lot, you can see, are they just copying and pasting? Or maybe we ask them to talk through, okay, why are you doing that? Can you explain what's happening? Or we're kind of even learning ourselves how to handle this. We might start saying, hey, could you do this part without it? But
Yeah,
on one
sure.
hand, you want them to use it, but we have to know that they
That they
know
can.
something themselves.
Right.
So, but still at the end of the day, you know, why I really wanted to come on your podcast, because I think it's about, you have to have in the 2020s a human involved. You can't just let it go to AI if you want the best results. You have to, even if it's part of your process, as a tool for the recruiter, as a tool for the developer, you need that human there to kind of keep the big picture and catch the little things to know if this person really is a good fit.
Right. It's all really really well pointed out and positioned, I think. And as you were sharing this, notion of needing to validate that there's competence in terms of like using I was thinking about something that I recently spoke about on a actually this week's episode, but by the time our episode comes out, it'll be much further in the past, which is around, if whether or not AI will replace HR jobs, which I don't believe it will. Maybe some parts of the role, which is can be heavily administrative. But either way, that's not the point why, and not the reason why I bring this up. One of the things that I mentioned is that a reason for AI to slow down in terms of businesses replacing people with AI is because of security risks. And so when I think about a company in software development and technology, information and technology, whatever it might be, if there is a moment in the recruiting process where coding or actually doing a test is required, a lot of the time we see that NDAs are required and that there has to be some element of, ensuring that there's security with information that a candidate is receiving, as part of the process. It's not always that way. It depends on how far they are along in the process, of course. But I was thinking about, as you were sharing before, that if someone is just, taking, the question or the problem, and it's not a live coding test or demonstration, that then there poses a security risk for the company if they've here required the candidate to sign an NDA or to, you know, uh, have some semblance of confidentiality with the sensitive information they're receiving to perform this test, and then they go and they put it into an AI tool. There are risks there for a company. So then companies might be much more inclined to step away from using AI to having, a similar process to yours, which would allow for live testing, which would then showcase whether or not someone, is using something appropriately, that they're using this data, sensitively and things like that. So it's interesting. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the security side of things, but I definitely think that that is a point in the human centric recruiting process bucket.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think it's very rare circumstances where a company should have to expose sensitive information in order to properly vet someone. I think there are ways
Mm.
to do it in a way where you're not exposing any of that sensitive information. So,
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of interesting intellectual property questions with a lot of these coding AIs, like that I haven't even wrapped my head around. Like, one of them is GitHub Copilot, which is like
Mm.
autocomplete for coders, and
Mm-hmm.
you're coding and you can it'll be like, hey, it looks like you want to do this. And you could just push tab and then it like auto completes a
Wow.
function that you're writing or
Wow.
something. But how did it know that? Is it whose code trained that model? Is it
And
taking
whose
all the
property is
code?
it?
Yeah. Like, are you, there may be,
Wow.
I should research this more before blabbing about it on a podcast, but like, I, I'm curious, are they just using everybody's code out there to train this model? And then is that
I mean, they could
fair?
be.
Like, is
Yeah.
that violating the intellectual property of all the people that put their code in GitHub? Like,
Well, I guess it
or maybe
depends on if there's like a contract or anything. It's like the same thing with terms and conditions when you're on Facebook or Instagram. If you're not
yeah,
reading that,
click.
yeah,
Yeah.
you just click it and like you have no idea what you're signing. Like the reason I deleted TikTok was because it traces and records your actual activity outside of the app. And once I read that, I was like, what the heck did I just agree to? Why would I do that? But most people don't read those things. So I would imagine that in software like that or AI tools like that, if you're just agreeing to the terms, same with ChatGPT, I just agreed to the terms. I didn't read anything. You know, I guess it could be
Yeah.
that they own the intellectual property of
Yeah. I
anything
need to
that's
do
coming
more
in.
homework on that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I need to
it'll
do
be
more homework
interesting.
on
Let me know what you find.
that. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Damien, for kind of walking us through this whole kind of concept and philosophy around recruiting. I think that I would imagine that many, if not most, of the listeners who have kind of heard all sides of the spectrum here, that they probably are in agreement with you that there has to be, the human interaction involved in the recruiting process, just like what you all are doing at Scalable Path, really keeping the human in the process and making sure that there is that mutual interest from both the company and the company hiring and as well the candidate. I think those two things are really important. So with that said, where can the listeners connect with you further and learn more about Scalable Path, about what you're doing and the philosophies that you've brought to the podcast today?
They can just go to our website at scalablepath.com. And, if they're looking to hire a software developer or designer, it's a big orange button they can click on. Otherwise, they can just send me a message on our contact page if they want to talk about something else.
Amazing, amazing. I'll make sure that all of that info is linked in the show notes as well. Amazing. Well, I really appreciate your time. I don't know if there are any parting thoughts here, any lasting takeaways that you want the listeners to walk away with.
No, I think I've said my piece. I really enjoyed the conversation. Yeah, it was a fun topic.
Awesome. Yes, I agree. I'm sure we'll continue to see more of this AI and, as a recruiting process and otherwise shake out as we continue on in this journey of life. Because we're learning so much every single day. And I'm sure that by the time this episode comes out, there will be even more to report on, even more to think about. So thank you so much for your time and for being a guest on the podcast. And for all the listeners, make sure you go to Scalable Path. I will link it in the show notes and connect with Damien as well. His LinkedIn will be in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Damien. Again, have a great one. Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.